Today is March 21st, 2020. My name is Byron, and welcome to the second installation of this vlog. Oh, that's right. Just a real quick upkeeping type thing. There was a person who commented on the last video. Unfortunately, the comment is no longer going to be there because I had to change the channel name that I had, and unfortunately I was not far thinking enough to screen cap that or something. I realized after I had already posted everything and went searching for it in the YouTube search bar that there was already a channel that was named exactly what my channel was. It was Thinking Aloud, but like aloud as in like you are allowed to, instead of allowed as in like out loud. Yeah, so to the kind person who gave me encouragement on the last video, I'm not sure if you're ever going to see this one, but thank you very much. I'm definitely going to continue this, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to keep your comment or screenshot or anything. That's my bad. I guess the moral of this story is that you should do a little do a little research before you go into things, and also just, you know, have a little forethought as per usual. Yeah, so oh, and the last thing is that I'm not clever. Yeah, so that's that. I wasn't really sure what else to talk about in this part. Oh, here's a thought. I watched that Imagine video that was made by a bunch of celebrities, what's been called the Cursed Imagine video, and I found it exceedingly funny. Mostly because it's really sad and totally out of touch, but I guess the better way to put it, and what I was thinking about after watching it, I'm sure there are other commentators who have said stuff about it, but what I was thinking about after I saw that is that the video is kind of a perfect analogy for utopianism, and it's very interesting that we'd have people, you know, talking with this kind of utopianistic language in you know, what we might call the age of disaster. You know, we're in a situation where things are not anywhere near utopia, and yet you have these people who have decided to use this kind of language, and I found it to be really analogous to the utopian projects and utopianistic thinking as a production itself, for two reasons. The first is that just its composition is kind of emblematic of the problems with utopianist thinkers, and the second one is that the messaging is just totally wrong. So we're gonna start with the first one, and then we'll hit the second one. What's interesting to me is that if you watch the video, you have a bunch of different people all singing the song, but when you watch it back to back, the problem with it becomes apparent that there are people singing in different keys, they have different tempos, they have even different genre of music, and it just goes to show that you know, collective action is really difficult, and something spur of the moment like this If you don't have kind of common procedures to kind of hold everything together, it just comes out wrong. And that's kind of something totally wrong with the utopianist way of thinking in general. It's just how they tend to go. You know, you can have a bunch of different people of various different skills and abilities, and you can tell that some of the people in that video are fantastic singers. The problem is that they're all doing their own thing, as well as they think they should do it, or with their own way of thinking about how it needs to be done. And when you put it all together in sequence, it just looks totally fragmented, and it just doesn't sound right. There's no cohesion, right? And so I find that to be really analogous of the kind of utopianist project, because they all have this kind of high-minded utopianist vision, right? But their individual image of the vision is different, and so what you get is a bunch of different people who all have these high aspirations, and maybe some of them are very good at something individually, right? But when you put them together to try to do something collectively, they do their own thing, and then it just kind of comes out wrong. So I found that to be just really interesting, and just like this perfect analogy for why these kinds of things fail. You know, it doesn't matter how high-minded you are. I like to say it's not the thought that counts, ultimately, in the end. You know, you can have someone accidentally, through sheer serendipity, do the right thing. They may not even realize that they're doing the right thing. They may even have bad intentions and accidentally do the right thing. The ineffectual villain of sorts. The point is, though, that, like, you can have... And unless everybody has common procedures and a clear vision of what everybody's working toward together, it's just not going to line up right. You know, and you just get this kind of slapdash, horrible Frankenstein monster. So, I found that really funny, and emblematic of all kinds of things in the way people think about things and go about things. So that's number one, the kind of embodied analogy of the train wreck that was this video. The second thing is the messaging. And I find this song really interesting, mostly because I think that it's totally missing the point, and just gets everything wrong. How should we say this? So the first thing is the whole, like, imagine no heaven, imagine no hell. It's interesting to me that that's the first place you would go with a utopian vision. And, you know, as I said, I work for a church, and if you've studied any little bit of theology, even in Christian theology, you have a conception of heaven on earth. If you look at the Lord's Prayer, for example, it says... thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, right? And so there's embedded in the Christian theology and ethos that you're going to take this kind of divine will and embody it in the world, right? And that there's this separate world that is already embodied like that, and so it's our job to make this world seem like that one, or bridge the gap, so to speak. So I find it interesting that this is the first place that you go, and the line after that is imagine all the people living for today. Now there's two ways of interpreting this. One is the more literal way, which is living for today, as in just like living day to day without any, you know, future planning, and obviously that one's really myopic and stupid. I don't think I have to explain why. I'm sure other people will have made that point already. Um, it's I think that the intent behind the lyric is more about its connection to the idea of heaven and hell, and that instead of living for some kind of afterlife, you live for the world as it is. But the interesting thing that in the utopian vision, as opposed to the Christian vision of heaven and hell, is that this idea of God's will is part of the Christian version, but there's no necessary intent in the utopian vision other than just utopia itself, right? And that's very interesting to me, because if you're going to create something that is even approximating a utopia, you're going to need procedures. Like I said with the first example, right? It's you have to have a clear vision of what it is that exactly you're going to do that is going to replicate specific results to get you to this utopia that you claim, right? So for the Christians, they don't have this problem, because whatever God's will is, this kind of divine will, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, right? You have the basis for something that is saying that, okay, there's an intention or a will that is primary above all other wills or intentions that we may be able to embody. But for the utopians, that question is left ambiguous, right? They don't even ask that question. It's very fascinating to me, because if you don't ask that question, effectively you're all just kind of, chickens running around with your heads cut off. It's questionable whether or not you're ever going to get to somewhere even remotely approximating a utopia. And personally, I don't think you ever will, right? So that's the song starts with destroying the foundation upon which you would even attempt to answer the question of how do you get to a utopia, or even something closely approximating it. And and when you put it that way, now you realize, well, shit, this is a really bad idea. There's other things in the song that are just totally off and wrong when it comes to utopianistic thinking. For example, you have the idea that there's going to be no possessions, but everyone is going to share, right? It's very fascinating to me that the people who are saying this message are the very people who have the most to share. Property rights are interesting in that they're capable of... They're both protective of those who have and protective of those who don't have a lot. Right? If you have nothing, obviously property rights don't do anything for you. But if you have a little bit, or even just, you're hanging on by the skin of your teeth, you've got enough, but not like a lot. They do protect you, right? Because if somebody comes along to try to steal your stuff and you're just scraping by, you have legitimate claim to whatever was taken, right? And that's what the property right does. Whereas for the opposite problem, which is often the problem that is taken to be the bigger problem, and perhaps it is, it's that, people who have a lot and are hoarding it and don't do anything with it for their common man are the ones who are seen as a problem, because property rights keep them from being forced to use those things that they have, their excess, in a socially responsible way. And I get that kind of way of thinking. I just don't think that it's a viable solution to just force people to do that. You can to some extent, right? For example, in the case of like a lawsuit, I understand it there. Otherwise, if you were going to say, well, no, property is off limits at all, you wouldn't be able to have a court say, no, you have to pay reparations to this person because you screwed up and they got hurt because of it, right? That would be totally off the table. So I'm not like an absolutist in terms of property rights, but I do think it's interesting that the attack is on property itself as opposed to the attitudes and behaviors of those who have, and it's emblematic also with the Imagine song in this regard, because if you think about all of these celebrities who are singing this song, they are the people who have way more than enough, right? I mean, they're singing this song from their giant estates and mansions. You know, like a lot of them are, and it's very interesting to me that the people who are in the best position to help people like me who are facing unemployment are singing this song about having no possessions. Well, if you really believed that, if you really believed that that possessions are evil, then why not just hire someone to give away everything you have? Why do you have a mansion? It's really weird to me, and it's just totally like tone deaf, figuratively speaking. I just find that very fascinating, and I guess like the big like what is it? It's like the best signifier of the kind of person who is a utopianist but doesn't really understand the practical implications of trying to live in a world where we all share based on our common humanity is the I would say it's the luxurization of basic necessities. So, for example, you can luxurize basically anything. You can turn anything into a luxury. And if you look at people who are incredibly rich and the way that they use their money, oftentimes they use it in ways to take things that are basic necessities and turn them into luxuries. So we'll just take like the three basic ones, like food, clothing, and shelter. You know, gourmet food is a luxurized version of a basic necessity. You know, there are people who put gold on food and eat it as simply as an ornament, and I find that just absolutely grotesque. That people would spend money on that. It's such a waste of capital. Where was I going with this? So this is a way that you can luxurize food, right? It's a very fascinating example of how we can take things that are normally seen as basic necessities and turn them into things that are unnecessary. You know, I could understand if you were rich and you were using your vast amounts of wealth to change your dietary habits, right? You were optimizing your nutrition. You know, I could understand that. That makes total sense. You know, you don't have to justify that to me. But to put gold on it, gold doesn't have any nutritional value. You literally put it in and you shit it out. It does absolutely nothing. You can't even digest it. So the fact that there are people who would do that and spend obscene amounts of money in order to put, you know, gold on pizza crust or whatever, it's just, you know, if this is the kind of thing that people are willing to do in the world, you're not going to get to a utopia where people are willing to share, because it's just a waste of capital. You know, so another example is something like designer clothing. Fashion is a huge industry, but there's certain types of clothing that is totally and completely unnecessary. You don't need, you know, 100 pairs of shoes, and you don't need an entire room that is your wardrobe. It's completely unnecessary, right? This is a luxurization of a basic necessity. And designer clothes that's like, you know, obscenely expensive is unnecessary too. Now maybe you want to customize your wardrobe a little bit to express yourself. I don't mind that. Right, but like there's a limit, you know, there's an amount of capital that's like, this is too much, right? Now you're just wasting capital. And the same thing can be done for, obviously, shelter. I mean, look at these people in their turbo mansions and all of that kind of stuff. This is the luxurization of a basic necessity. It's the luxurization of shelter. And I find the fact that the people who are talking about this utopian vision in the age of in this kind of new world of disaster, who are clinging to this kind of, idea, are the ones who are living in the most comfort. It's very fascinating to me that people could be that totally removed from the basic problems that people who are not them have. So yeah, I all of this stuff was just floating around in my head, and I thought I'd get it out there. So yeah, that'll be it for today's episode, I think. Thank you so much for watching if you did, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.